What an absolutely impressive show that Cyclone Neville continues to show across the Indian Ocean. Now a Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and a mid-Category 3 at that, and could be reaching Category 4 status very, very soon. Right now, it's got estimated winds of 120 miles an hour, which is a lot higher than what originally we were forecasting for the storm to get up to, and it's still strengthening at this time, believe it or not. In a marginally environment, has to be said, moving west at 11 miles per hour and a pressure of 955 millibars per our latest analysis. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center has also recently followed in our intensity estimate of 120 miles per hour, so good support on that. So here's where the storm is located right now. It's located 518 miles away from Christmas Island, 661 from Exmouth, 62 from Cocos Keeling Island, 679 from Coral Bay, and 2142 from Isle Amsterdam. Thankfully, these locations generally will be taking upwards as the storm is going to move off towards the west, and thankfully is not a threat to any land areas over the next few days. 17.8 degrees south, 104.7 degrees east is its current location, far away from any land areas in the Indian Ocean. So here's the wind field right now, incredibly small, has to be said, mainly on the northwestern side of 60 nautical miles, but generally it's about as nearly as a full circle as they can get, really, to be honest, when it comes to the tropical cyclone things. And no watches or warnings generally are going to be in effect over the next 5 days, as this storm will pass harmlessly again over open waters and is pretty much only a threat to shipping interests as well as the animals that prowl our oceans that we know as fish. So here's the main threat with this storm right now. Rip currents is a pretty significant issue. Residents visiting westward and northward facing beaches on the coastline of Australia, the Cocos Keeling Islands, Christmas Island, and maybe even some parts of Indonesia even, southward facing coasts in Indonesia that is, are recommended to tune into the local weather office or whatever they get their rip current information from to determine if it is safe to go in the water at your beach that you are planning to visit. If not, don't go in the water. Trust me, these things are extremely dangerous and people oftentimes underestimate them. If you end up getting caught in a rip current, swim parallel to the shore to exit the rip current. And once you are out of the rip current, try your best to swim towards shore. Do not fight the rip current, as it will only tire you out. So here's our latest intensity forecast, what we're seeing right now. It's a bit hit or miss at how much the storm will intensify, but look at this. We're forecasting a peak of 140 miles per hour, Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Does it get to Category 5 on the Australian scale? We don't think it does, but it could get awfully close. And then after that peak intensity, it rapidly weakens, and by day 4, it'll be post-tropical and rapidly losing its circulation as the environmental conditions will turn very unfavorable for this storm. So here's the latest Joint Typhoon Warning Center's forecast cone as of 9Z. They are due to update in about an hour or two, so we'll have to wait and see what they forecast. Of course, they are going to go with 120 miles per hour for their initial intensity, so I imagine that they're probably going to forecast a Category 4. But for this forecast cone that we have right here, they were forecasting 110 miles per hour in about 6 to 12 hours from now, and that would be the generalized peak. But look at how fast that storm weakens once it passes its peak intensity. 80 knots down to 60 knots, it looks like, there in 24 hours. That's quite the rapid weakening rate. So here's what the satellite estimates are seeing right now. They're sort of all over the place, really, or they're sort of behind, I really should be saying. Most of the Dvorak estimates you can see are suggesting that the storm is only a Category 1 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Given that this storm is quite small, they aren't accurately able to capture the storm true intensity, which is truly unfortunate. This is quite strongly a Category 3 based on satellite estimates and microwave passes. So here's what the models are saying right now for this storm. The DFS is, of course, given its resolution in this small storm, it's not going to get the whole resolution very well, this storm. It does have it peaking, it looks like it maybe has a Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Obviously, we know it's going to be a lot stronger than that. But you can see there, it does suggest that there is still some 12 to 24, maybe even 36 hours for this storm to continue to intensify before it reaches peak intensity. So there is still some wiggle room for this storm to absolutely continue to intensify, and it could honestly, if it continues at this rapid intensification rate, because only 24 hours ago, this was only a really pushing 50 to 60 miles per hour, and you know, we're just seeing this rapid intensification rate that's going to continue over the next 12 to 24 hours. And given the intensification rate, this storm could be 150 miles per hour if it keeps at this pace in 24 hours. Not saying it will be, but it could. So here's the one major caveat to that, though, and that's the sea surface temperatures. Right now, only 26 degrees Celsius underneath the storm, maybe 27, 28 just to its north. That is favorable enough for tropical cyclone development, but for a storm of this intensity, generally you do want a little bit higher, has to be said. Although the small size of the storm is going to help, and the very decently fast-paced movement, or average movement, I should say, is going to help as well. That way it doesn't upload those warm waters. That way it keeps recycling those warm waters. Surface observations aren't really suggesting too much. As you can see Australia down there in the bottom right corner. Let's say that we have a surface observation. I believe that is Christmas Island there on the top left side. I mean, that's the Cocos Keeling Islands, one of the two. Not really suggesting really anything much really in terms of this storm. We're not really expecting a whole lot of observation places to be of use over the next 5 days, unfortunately. So here's what we're seeing on the model line right now. You can see the red is the GFS, blue is the HWRF, and the gray line is the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's forecast track. After tracking the storm for what seems like an eternity at this point, I mean, it only formed like a week and a half ago into a tropical cyclone. It's been that tropical cyclone throughout the whole entire week and a half, by the way. It's finally come up to this, I guess you could say, with this storm. Took forever to do it, and well, here we are. The WC track is a little bit farther north, has to be said, so maybe a southward forecast shift coming up in the next advisory. Intensity estimates are saying that there is still some room for this storm to intensify. They weren't even suggesting a major, but of course, well, we all know where we are now. We're at major category 3 at this point, and it's still strengthening. Wind shear is forecast to go up pretty marginally. I guess right now it's 5 knots of wind shear. Another 5 knots upwards could harm the storm. It has to be said, with a storm this small. This kind of thing is pretty normal with these kind of storms. Just a little issue could cause big implications for these small storms, and that is very true with this. Sea surface temperatures are decent. They're forecast to be relatively favorable for the next 36 to 48 hours, maybe even increasing a little bit during that period. So we'll have to wait and see how the storm sort of rides this line of favorable conditions, and it's also in an incredibly dry air environment, so that's another caveat that we have to watch closely. So here's what the satellite imagery is saying right now for this storm. Look at that. A very clear category 3, if I've ever seen one, across the Indian Ocean here. Does not look the part of 120 miles per hour, has to be said, on raw imagery, but if you look at microwave passes, the core inside of this thing is very, very strong. So that is a likely caveat to bump the intensity up by 5 knots as well, from 100 to 105 knots, and that's why I'll be gone with that. If I had to guess, it'll probably get that appearance probably by the time this update is probably on the air, to be honest, given that the eye temperature is already in the positives, believe it or not. So here's a visible look at the storm right now. You can see that it's got an interesting appearance. I've seen more prettier cyclones in this area, obviously. Early 2017 immediately comes to mind. But a lot of people have been comparing this storm to Cyclone Ned back in 1989. I did an animation on that a few months ago. That was a high-end category 4 in an incredibly dry environment, so these kind of things do happen every once in a while across the Indian Ocean. And here's a water vapor imagery, and you can just see those darker colors off towards the left-hand side of this storm. Look at how dry that environment is. That's a potential caveat for the storm's peak intensity that we need to watch very closely. While a single dry air intrusion into the storm could mean life or death for this storm, and could mean the peak intensity could go either way, up or down over the next few days. Certainly a threat for the fishies, Cyclone Neville, in the Indian Ocean.